She was like, Jacqueline, if they play Getaway Car or Maroon, she's on crisis watch.
Anything that has to do with technology creating opportunity for us, I find very enjoyable.
For decades, Disney was the gold standard of family entertainment, an untouchable kingdom of imagination that wove unforgettable stories into the fabric of popular culture. Children and adults alike flocked to every new release, guided by the belief that Disney's magic had no limits. Yet, for all the glitter and legacy, even Disney has faced its share of creative misfires. The latest uproar centers around the live-action Snow White, a project meant to be another sparkling jewel in the company's crown. Instead, its lead actress, Rachel Zegler, seems to have ignited a tidal wave of backlash that could mark one of Disney's most turbulent chapters ever. The trouble began innocently enough. Rachel was lauded as a rising star after her breakout role in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. With her powerful singing voice and strong stage presence, she appeared destined for the big leagues. Disney was quick to cast her in the legendary role of Snow White, hoping to capitalize on her vocal talents and modern appeal. Early announcements portrayed her casting as bold, progressive, and a breath of fresh air for a classic tale. But from the moment her name was attached to the project, controversies stacked up like dominoes, each one crashing into the next and amplifying the damage. Fans started raising their eyebrows when Rachel took to social media and declared that if certain people weren't voting for her preferred political candidate, they should unfollow her. Many saw this as crossing a line, a needless provocation that might alienate a significant chunk of the audience. Disney, presumably enamored with her youth and willingness to speak out, overlooked the potential fallout. In their view, social media activism might appeal to younger, socially conscious fans. Or so they hoped, but the seeds of discord were already planted. In Hollywood, you can sometimes get away with polarizing statements if you balance them with undeniable talent or winning humility.
No, and I feel like it was like that for a lot of us. It's easier for me than it was for Tom because I wasn't playing a character that had already existed in the previous films. And those performances are so wonderful that you don't want to try to recreate anything because there's the fear of failing miserably. But also it's 64 years before the original films take place, the original books. And Francis Lawrence, who directed Catching Fire and both Mockingjay films, and Nina, who produced all of the Hunger Games content, they didn't put any pressure on us to try to recreate anything.
At first, it seemed Rachel might manage that. She openly discussed her background and upbringing during West Side Story promos, bringing attention to issues of identity and representation. The industry, hungry for fresh voices, applauded. Yet, the deeper she ventured into the spotlight, the more glaring her missteps became. She started complaining publicly about not being invited to the 94th Academy Awards ceremony, where West Side Story snagged multiple nominations. While a lead actress might indeed deserve a seat at the Oscars, her approach struck many as melodramatic. She posted about wearing sweatpants and her boyfriend's flannel from home, lamenting the Academy's failure to grant her the honor of attendance. Twitter went wild. Some defended her stance, saying an actress in an Oscar-nominated film should naturally be invited. Others found her outburst self-centered. Disney stepped in to smooth things over, orchestrating a last-minute invitation and even awarding her presenter duties. Crisis averted, right? Well, not exactly. The entire debacle solidified the impression that Rachel would broadcast her grievances to the public whenever she felt snubbed. It also signaled that Disney was willing to bend over backward to keep her happy. As it turned out, this was just the beginning. Her next major public relations stumble came during the promotion of Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Typically, cast members talk enthusiastically about the story, the director's vision, or camaraderie on set. Rachel, in stark contrast, bluntly stated she joined the film for one reason: she needed a job. Such candor might be refreshingly honest behind closed doors, but fans found it off-putting at best and disrespectful at worst. Did she actually believe in the project, or was it just a paycheck? Her comment came off like a slap to anyone who considered the movie a labor of love, from die-hard fans of the franchise to the film's entire creative team. At around the same time, she appeared at a publicity event wearing a t-shirt with a harsh in-your-face message.
She's my best friend, and she's the one who sent me the casting notice and said, "Thank me when you're famous." It's the craziest thing ever that it came true in that weird way, and that's why I bring her everywhere, and she's the best ever. But yeah, I put myself on tape. It's the worst tape you've ever seen in your life. I have no idea how I got the part still, and it's being used to teach future casting directors at NYU.
This might have been intended as quirky fashion or a playful bit of rebellion, but in the context of her growing reputation for provocation, it read more like a statement dripping with contempt for detractors. People who had been on the fence started to form a clearer opinion. Was this new Disney princess a brand risk? The question began to circulate among fans, entertainment pundits, and even casual observers who'd seen one too many Rachel controversies pop up in the headlines. Then came the staggering blow. Rachel's comments about the original 1937 Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. In an era where respect for classics is often a selling point, Rachel went on record criticizing the film for being outdated. She mentioned she had only watched it once as a child because it frightened her. Worse, she dismissed central elements of the classic story, implying that the romance at the heart of it was antiquated and should be replaced with more modern themes. While some younger viewers might have agreed that the film, released in a radically different era, could use a contemporary spin, lifelong Disney fans were incensed. Snow White isn't just any character, she's the literal origin point of Disney's legacy in animated features. She's the princess who kicked off a nearly century-long empire of animated storytelling. Hearing the new actress sneer at that foundation felt disrespectful. Fans who'd grown up adoring the gentle princess found themselves bristling at Rachel's dismissive tone. Criticism raged online, with many pointing out that if she disliked the classic so much, why sign on to be its modern embodiment? The dwarfs themselves became another storm. Early set photos leaked online, suggesting that the Seven Dwarfs might be drastically reimagined or replaced by magical creatures of various backgrounds. People speculated that Disney was trying to skirt issues of stereotypes or concerns raised by actors like Peter Dinklage. However, the final result, mismatched, sometimes CGI-driven stand-ins, looked messy and unfaithful to the timeless dynamic beloved by fans.
That would be my preference as well.
Why your preference?
Well, look, I'm going to be 72 years old tomorrow. I've put in almost 50 years. There are other things in life that I'd like to do. I also am confident that the board will be able to identify an able successor.
Reshoots were rumored, spiraling the budget beyond $200 million, a monstrous sum for a fairy tale remake that now had the stench of controversy clinging to it. When the first teaser trailer finally surfaced, the internet backlash exploded. Within days, it racked up an unprecedented number of dislikes, crossing the million mark and sending a loud message that audiences weren't eager to spend money on a project they felt insulted the original. Branding experts began warning Disney, negativity of this scale can prove catastrophic. Instead of building excitement, the trailer seemed to confirm every doubt fans had about the direction, the actress, and the overall approach. Then came the announcement. Snow White was being delayed by a full year. Officially, Disney cited ongoing strikes and the need for additional post-production work. But industry insiders whispered that the real driving force behind the delay was the need to retool major sections of the film to mitigate the PR meltdown. The studio had poured countless millions into a project now besieged by daily waves of criticism. Meanwhile, a vast portion of Disney's loyal audience, parents, classic animation enthusiasts, and casual moviegoers, felt alienated, as though their love for the original had been undermined in the name of modernization. Under mounting pressure, Rachel issued an apology. Well, it was labeled an apology, but in the view of many, it sounded more like a script penned by Disney's public relations department. Gone was the outspoken, provocative tone. Instead, she offered a subdued series of vague acknowledgments about learning experiences, with no direct reference to her specific statements that riled fans. Critics and YouTubers pounced, calling it shallow damage control. They analyzed her earlier remarks side by side with the carefully curated language of the statement. It didn't take long for people to tear it apart, labeling it insincere and even mocking it as copy-pasted from a PR handbook. Observers drew parallels to Disney's treatment of other controversial figures, like Gina Carano. Carano had been fired from her role in The Mandalorian for social media posts that some found offensive.
The one where he was in the boxing ring.
Boxing ring, and Howard Cosell, who was then a famous announcer for ABC Sports, introduced him. And I was asked at some point to get Mr. Sinatra Listerine. We're at Madison Square Garden. It's not like there's a Listerine store in Madison Square Garden. So I dutifully ran out, found a drugstore of some sort. This is before CVS. This is 45 years ago.
Yet Rachel, who had repeatedly made divisive comments toward fans, was apparently protected from real consequences. The discrepancy riled people further. intensifying the sense that Disney was picking and choosing whose missteps were punishable and whose could be swept under the rug. By the time the dust settled around the so-called apology, the damage was well past the point of easy repair. Fans pointed out that Rachel's behavior spanned many months. This wasn't a single impulsive tweet or a misunderstood joke. It was a series of statements and actions that painted a picture of someone who had little regard for the traditions or fans that had nurtured Disney's success. Competing YouTubers and influencers churned out video after video dissecting each new revelation, fueling a cycle of constant controversy that overshadowed any glimmer of positive buzz the production might have salvaged. Disney, for its part, appeared stuck in a precarious position. The company had already invested more than $200 million in this high-profile project, along with countless hours of production and promotional strategy. A big box office flop wouldn't just be embarrassing, it could also deepen the financial woes the company was already facing from other underperforming releases and challenges in streaming. Insiders quietly wondered whether executives might have to scale back planned sequels or spin-offs if Snow White bombed. The entire enterprise was now riding on a movie carrying an outsized burden of skepticism. None of this would matter much if the controversies were contained to a small but vocal group of online critics. But the wave of backlash had grown broader, seeping into mainstream discussions about Hollywood's creative choices. People who hadn't cared about Snow White at all were now hearing about the fiasco from coworkers, reading outraged tweets, and seeing trending hashtags about boycotts. When word spreads this widely, it changes the narrative from a mere creative risk to a legitimate brand crisis. That's exactly what happened here.
Anything that has to do with technology creating opportunity for us, I find very enjoyable. The creative process at its highest level is at times frustrating, but often, and fortunately for us, really enjoyable.
As opening day, now pushed back, loomed on the horizon, speculation ran rampant about whether Disney might even recast or rewrite significant parts of the film. Some fans found themselves torn, passionate about the original, yet unwilling to support a modern version that seemed to mock the very story they held dear. Others watched from the sidelines, intrigued by the spectacle of an actress apparently biting the hand that fed her. Still others championed Rachel's right to express her honest views, arguing that a classic tale can and should evolve. Yet the negativity flooding social media drowned out these more moderate voices. In many ways, the fiasco has become a cautionary tale. It highlights what can happen when a studio pushes forward with a high-risk remake of a cherished classic, while its chosen star repeatedly alienates the core audience. Beyond the financial implications, there's a deeper cultural clash at play. Disney built its empire on nostalgia and family values, crafting stories that soared precisely because people wanted to believe in them. Now, with controversies swirling about forced updates, compromised legacy characters, and an actress who seems dismissive of the original's charm, the classic Disney formula might be facing its toughest test yet. Industry observers point out that if Snow White manages a successful box office run, despite the negative press and widespread fan revolts, it may vindicate Disney's strategy of aggressively rebooting older properties with a contemporary spin. On the other hand, if it collapses under the weight of boycotts and grim word of mouth, it could become the new benchmark for how not to handle a remake. Disney's next moves in marketing, public relations, and distribution may dictate whether this film can overcome the hurricane of bad buzz or become another big-budget cautionary story. At the heart of this spectacle is the question of accountability. Some fans demand that Rachel publicly and sincerely address her remarks about the original film, the fans she alienated, and the controversies she stirred. Others argue that the time for genuine atonement is long gone, replaced by well-oiled PR statements that ring hollow. The entire episode underscores how crucial authenticity is in the digital age. One offhand comment can spark a viral uproar.
Business with large Western companies and brands, but we bring to China a type of ideology, admittedly a relatively benign one as it relates to politics in China, but still a Western ideology. And in many ways, that had value to them.
Overshadowing even the best-intentioned creative vision. Meanwhile, Rachel's career trajectory hangs in a precarious balance. If Snow White ultimately tanks, she could be saddled with the reputation of the star who sank a $200 million Disney film. Studios might grow wary of casting someone perceived as a risk. Conversely, if the movie exceeds expectations, she might emerge unscathed. perhaps even pivoting the narrative to how she endured massive online criticism and still came out on top. Hollywood history is full of polarizing figures who managed to bounce back, after all. Beyond just the immediate players, Snow White has now become a flashpoint in the wider cultural discussion about legacy, modernization, and corporate responsibility. Disney has always tried to walk a delicate line between preserving the warmth of its classic stories and appealing to new generations seeking progressive values. This is why many fans felt cautious optimism initially. There is room to update old tales for modern tastes, provided it's done with respect and nuance. Where they took issue was seeing the new lead seemingly mock or belittle a story that shaped so many childhoods. The dwarfs controversy, the reworked plot points, and the actress's ongoing sparring with segments of the fan base all converged into a potent brew. Even critics who typically applaud bold creative reimaginings found themselves questioning the wisdom of such changes. People want to see Snow White evolve, but not at the expense of the core essence that made it iconic in the first place. When that essence feels sidelined, audiences respond with their wallets and their words. Now, Disney finds itself in an unenviable position of trying to quell the storm without sacrificing the film's entire premise. The schedule shift, rumored script tweaks, and possible reshoots are all signals that the studio is desperate to regain some goodwill before the film finally opens. But public trust is a fragile thing, and each new tidbit of negative news has only fueled the notion that the company is flailing. No amount of polished press statements can hide genuine discontent once it's reached this fever pitch. When the time finally comes for Snow White to meet the world, will audiences give it a fair chance? Or will the months of chaos overshadow any merits it might have?
And my advice to them was to not hear the noise as much, to continue doing the job that we've entrusted them to do.
Right.
Which is to tell the truth, to state the facts, to present the news in an accurate and a fair and in a timely basis.
Could the film pull off a stunning upset by winning over skeptics with breathtaking visuals or a compelling retelling, thus silencing even the most ardent critics? Or will everything collapse under the heavy baggage of pre-release controversies, turning Snow White into a punchline for future discussions about how studio plans can implode in a hyper-connected era? Wherever the chips fall, this saga has provided a glaring example of how studios, stars, and fans engage in an intricate dance. One major misstep, especially involving a beloved franchise, can unravel even the most carefully choreographed routine. Disney, with its storied heritage, is not immune. In fact, it might be more vulnerable because its audience has long held emotional attachments to characters like Snow White. Tarnishing that bond can lead to a reaction far more explosive than what you'd see from fans of a less iconic franchise. Perhaps the biggest lesson here is a reminder for future adaptations. Respect your source material, value your audience's nostalgia, and understand that a single star's social media presence can either catapult a project to new heights or drag it into a quagmire of animosity. In this case, Rachel's repeated remarks, whether well-intentioned or not, came off as dismissive toward a film that laid the foundation of Disney's empire. Fans noticed, critics pounced, and the story spiraled into one of the most contentious developments in recent Disney history. Despite everything, the film isn't out yet. There remains a chance, however slim, that the final cut manages to weave some of that old Disney magic, reminding viewers why they loved Snow White in the first place. Maybe the controversies will cool, or a last-minute PR miracle will shift the narrative to a more positive tone. But until the public sees the movie for themselves, the prevailing sentiment is skepticism. And in a market brimming with content options, skepticism easily morphs into apathy or outright refusal to buy a ticket.
She was like, Jacqueline, if they play Getaway Car or Maroon, she's on crisis watch. Not only did she play Getaway Car, she also played Maroon. I was having a mental breakdown in the audience at MetLife Stadium.
If the fiasco continues unabated, it could mark a significant turning point for Disney's live-action strategy, perhaps even prompting a reassessment of how they choose and guide the actors taking on iconic roles. There's already chatter that the next wave of remakes might adopt a safer approach, focusing on new talents who prioritize respect for the originals. Whether that's the right move or just an overcorrection remains to be seen. For now, the conversation rages on. Everyone has an opinion. Casual Disney fans outraged by perceived disrespect, longtime aficionados nostalgic for the classic film they grew up with, critics dissecting every new announcement, and PR specialists analyzing Disney's every move as a potential case study in brand management. The biggest question, however, lingers for the fans themselves. Will they forgive and forget? Or has Disney and Rachel crossed a line that can't be uncrossed? Looking ahead, it's clear that no matter which direction this drama finally takes, the story of this Snow White remake will go down in history as a lesson about the delicate balancing act of reimagining classics for modern audiences. If the audience truly rejects the princess chosen to represent such a beloved tale, it sends a message far broader than one film's box office performance. It speaks to how powerful the bond of nostalgia really is, and how studios risk that bond at their own peril. Share your thoughts, weigh in on Disney's decisions, and consider whether this version of Snow White can, against all odds, emerge from the ashes of controversy to recapture the magic that once made her the fairest of them all.